you, sir, for coming here. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Monsieur de Montbrial for organizing this conference, and it's vital. Now, I'd like to put a question to you first. Why was it that Evian was chosen as a venue? Is it because it's such a beautiful place in the early autumn? Is it because the G8 was held in Evian a few years back, and incidentally it was the first time that Mexico was invited to G8? Or is it because Evian is a spa town and might cure the global situation? Whichever the answer, I think we have to admit that talking about governance means that we have to look at the basis and the grounds for governance. I think it's worth us taking a few moments to look at the threats that human rights, democracy have to deal with in Latin America. Now, on the whole, Latin America is fairly democratic. Human rights and the rule of law have been considerably shored up over the last few years. We have overcome this old period of abuse and violations of democracy at the hands of the military or other groups. Pluralism, political pluralism is visible across Latin America. We have center-right parties or a whole host of leftist parties. And Latin America is, in fact, critical vis-à-vis the development models that are promoted by the major powers and the IMF and other institutional financial institutions. Latin America, for the moment, has been spared the impact of the crisis. Growth is strong, although still insufficient. The markets are open, and foreign investments are coming in, and we reached record levels over the last year. This being said, over the last few years, we have seen Latin American societies, the body politic, be disappointed by the situation. Now, as I have said, democracy has achieved tremendous progress, but our fellow citizens have not yet enjoyed all the benefits of democratic institutions. Over a recent poll, we have seen that our citizens seem to support democracy less than before. The fallout of globalization is not always seen as a positive impact. There's also migration, of course. There's migration within Latin America and towards the United States and/or Europe, maybe Spain more specifically. And these are issues that people haven't quite looked at. Now, you have to bear in mind that the most recent decisions in terms of immigration policy in Europe have led to a very real upheaval in our part of the world, even though we don't export, so to quote unquote, our people to many places apart from Spain. So, what is the situation? Well, despite the tremendous progress, still 43% of the people live in poverty and 18% in abject poverty. Now, some countries are more than unlikely to reach the Millennium Development Goals by the 2015 deadline. This being said, there are a number of social programs that are being implemented, and these social assistance programs are proving positive and useful in Mexico or Brazil, for instance. But this is still insufficient. Now, demographic growth has reached a plateau as compared to the 1970s. So fighting against social exclusion is still one of our main priorities, but we have to deal with other problems that might also undermine democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. What am I referring to? Well, crime and the fight against crime. This is what governments and societies at large are focusing on nowadays. So crime and insecurity is not only a consequence of poverty. Poverty is a major factor, but it often results from the emergence of very powerful cross-border crime organizations who traffic in drugs, weapons, and human beings. The real question, therefore, is the following. Will the democratic institutions manage the expectations of the people and bring about the transformation of societies and countries as a whole? Now, as I have said, the threats are no longer imposed from the outside. We have in the OAS and other fora a number of measures to protect democracy, so this is very positive. But over and beyond the objective factors that I have mentioned, there are a number of threats against democracy from the inside. It is by being too picky on some rules that the rules of democracy can be distorted, whether we're talking about economic or social rights having preeminence over democratic rights, for instance, or civic rights, can be a threat to democracy. We have seen, for instance, instant majorities in parliaments that support presidents. There is also a degree of unilateralism in the relationship, in the regional relationships, and there is therefore maybe the threat of an authoritarian approach, although it would still be formally democratic. Now, even though the judiciary has often tried to protect democracy, democracy is still fragile, the institutions are still potentially the target of corruption, and they have to be supported to prove their point to our fellow citizens.